All right, let's bring in former U.S. Attorney Brett Tolman, along with former federal prosecutor Andrew Cherkasky. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us. Listen, Brett, I want to go to you first. Just want to get your initial reaction to this conviction on 34 charges.
I think we ought to focus on the silver lining. The man is free now to go out and actually campaign, get out there and connect with the American people, because I think this was not unsurprising. You cannot be surprised when a judge eliminates, let's look at it from the beginning, eliminates the evidence that will come in support of Donald Trump, does not rule evidence that's unfairly prejudicial against coming in, does not allow certain witnesses the defense wants to pull in, shuts down the defense's cross-examination and direct examination of the only witness they did allow, and then instructs the jury using an instruction that begs the question whether or not the Constitution was ever part of the curriculum of Judge Merchan's legal education. So nobody should be surprised. I'm not surprised. We should be upset. We should be frustrated, but we should also be planning the response, the appropriate response in this country.
And Andrew, just to back up a little bit, it's still astonishing that we, in essence, and President Trump, in essence, the American people, do not really know what he was found guilty of. The way that Judge Merchan lined up the jury instructions, this case would have never been brought, period, because the misdemeanors, the 34 misdemeanors, were time barred. They had to gin them up to felonies because of an underlying crime. Well, the underlying crime could be one of three based on the jury instructions, and at this point, nobody on the outside has seen the verdict form. We don't really know what he was convicted of, and what they chose was the underlying crime.
Well, I think the jury got it wrong here, and I think that because of the most basic element that is at issue in this case. The underlying issue in all of this is whether they believe that Donald Trump and the rest of the folks involved putting in a legal expense as the descriptor of this payment was wrong. That's the key issue that they had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, if he had put in their charitable donation or construction cost and paid it out in cash, everybody in the country would see that as clearly fraudulent and wrong. But what the prosecutors got away with in this case is creating a cloud of confusion by focusing in on whether this payment was to influence the election or some sort of untold tax crime or some sort of unknown descriptor that these jurors individually decided without clarity as to which one of the three prongs from the escalating offense they chose. That was all, I think, for the prosecution to benefit their case, because that's what they made it about, instead of the very basic issue of whether this was wrong legally to put legal expense in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Brett, like you, I worked with Democrats and Republicans when I was a prosecutor for 10 years, and everybody, it didn't matter your political stripes. You respected the law, the process, the system. But since this case, I think the system is tainted, it's tarnished, and I'm concerned about the new prosecutors, the new judges that take these roles, and they see that this is the path forward. Politics might be able to play as opposed to a fidelity to the Constitution and the rule of law.
Yeah, Sean, you and I, we spent years in the courtroom. We spent our legal part of our legal career appreciating the attempt, at least, to have fairness in the criminal justice system and to evenly apply such powers that we've been given. The game has changed, though, and the game has changed. The rules have changed, and look, I think Republicans that are elected to office need to hit back hard. They need to take the gloves off. The other side is not going to stop being a bully and using this power inappropriately until they fear that it could be used against them. And until that happens, we may not be able to get back to a place where there's mutual respect for the law.
Mm. Andrew, talk about the foundation for, Brett, I'm going to stay with you. Talk about the foundation and for appeal for President Trump, the speed with which that appeal will be taken up, And the areas, you went through all of the ways in which the judge, he didn't just put his thumb on the scale, he was sitting on it during the course of this trial. and also what the prosecution did. But talk about the areas that will benefit President Trump on appeal, and quite frankly, it hopefully will give us faith in the judicial system, that there's a course to correct this verdict.
There's a couple of paths they could take. One is very unusual, but it may be justified in this case, and that's to file an emergency appeal, sort of like Bush v. Gore or IBM or others, where they got a final ruling at the lower court level, and then it was so outrageous, constitutional violations at stake, that were so substantial, and take it to the Supreme Court and see if they're willing to grant a stay of the sentence. I doubt they would review the case at that point, but they may be willing to stay the sentence in order for Donald Trump to then pursue his line of appeals within the New York court system. That would perhaps take a lot of the momentum out of what Judge Merchan could do so close to the election. Outside of that, there are plenty of grounds for an appeal to reverse this case. I'm not talking about gray areas. I'm talking about black and white violations by a judge and the evidence that he allowed in and what he didn't allow in, and then the jury instructions themselves.
Andrew, to paraphrase, I think I'm going to do this right, but Brett made the point that if Democrats aren't forced to live under the same rules that they forced Republicans to live under, this system's never going to change. And if Democrats have to live under the same structure and the same prosecution, the same rules of Republicans, they might come to the table to go, maybe this process isn't the best one for America when we prosecute our political enemies. I've got a lot of people I respect who disagree with that perspective, but I share Brett Tolman's viewpoint that everyone needs to live under the same scrutiny and the same prosecution and the same rules. What say you?
Politics have no place in the courtroom, and I've seen it happen too many times. It's changes in the codes that are applicable in that state or that federal criminal code at that time, and those changes affect real people, and they're highly politicized, some of the legal decisions that are made that happen in the courtroom. And you can just see the devastation on the individuals that go through that process. And until it happens on both sides of the aisle, I wonder if they will understand that. The problem that we're creating constitutionally with the idea of prosecuting former presidents in manners like this, I think creates a deep problem with the ability for the executive to be a trusted entity and to be able to get the best candidates who understand at that point that they have to put themselves through this type of a justice system that's so highly politicized. That's the problem in the future of these political type cases.
Well, no doubt the shine has come off the presidency for any future president with this political prosecution of Donald Trump. Brett, Andrew, thanks for being with us and sharing your expertise.